Hello and welcome in this country deep dive about the fleet market in China. It will be great to discuss this exciting but also complex fleet market together with an expert. And the expert is Lin Liu. He is Project Director MNC at Chuki. And he is here to explain a little bit more about what is happening in the Chinese fleet marketplace. Lin, welcome. I have a few questions for you because the audience is, of course, interested in the Chinese fleet marketplace. Can you first detail how big the vehicle market is in China and how many vehicles are sold each year?
Yeah, it's great. It's my great pleasure to be here to discuss with you. Yeah, for your first question, I think by the end of 2020, the total vehicle market in China is around 281 million. And the sold vehicles for the last 3 years, I think for 28 for the 2018 and 25 million for 2019, and there were also 25 million for 2020 last year.
Okay, and how big is the fleet market? How many vehicles do belong to companies?
I think there are around 37 million vehicles belong to companies.
Okay, and do you see that increasing year over year? Are more companies putting vehicles in place for their employees and for their business?
Actually, for the company usage, there are two kinds of company vehicles. Some company vehicles maybe for their own business, and for others, just like a leasing company, they're using their company vehicles as a tool to make money. Okay. So from my view, for these company vehicles, there is growing.
Okay, and can you also explain how these vehicles for those companies are financed? Are they mostly purchased? Are they already leased? Are they rented? What is the situation today in China?
For past years, I think for Chinese companies, they focus on purchasing vehicles. But now, more and more companies turn to leasing vehicles because they change their mind from the ownership of vehicle to usage of the vehicle. Yes.
Okay. And what kind of leasing companies exist in China? Are there local leasing players? Are these linked to financial institutions and banks? Are there international players? What is the situation?
In China market for the leasing companies, I think most of them are local companies. And also there are, we call it maybe top 10, they can do business all over the China. But most of them, local companies, and part of them for the regional. So there are, I think, for 10 participants do the business across the China.
Okay. And so these leasing companies are not always organized on a country-wide basis, but they can also operate more regionally within China. Is that correct?
Yes, within China, yes.
Okay. If you look then at the product, the solution that they offer in terms of leasing, is it more a closed-end leasing product that comes in the neighborhood of, let's say, full service leasing in Europe? Is it more an open-end leasing product like in North America, or is it something else?
For the operating leasing in China, it focuses on the closed end. It means that in the beginning, they including the maintenance, corrective maintenance and other maintenance in the beginning, not the open end leasing, just like North America.
What are the biggest leasing companies in China at the moment?
In terms of how many vehicles, I think, and for the national-wide coverage, I think Shochi is the first one, is number one.
Okay. And how many vehicles do you manage at the moment?
At the moment, more than 50,000 vehicles.
And what is
across 77 branches all over China.
And what is the ambition of Chuki in the upcoming years?
Actually, our ambition is focused on for the long-term leasing. We call it for service leasing to be, it means to company usage. And our plan is triple hold in next 5 years.
Okay. You are also a partner of ALD Automotive, an international player. What is the benefit of partnering with them?
Actually, for this partnership with ALD and Wheels Global Alliance, I think we can do some mutual reference for both parties. And we can get some interest and get some experience from the ALD. And also we can get some opportunities to provide our services for its international key accounts.
We see when we are looking at the brands, the car manufacturers, that more and more Chinese car manufacturers are expanding to other regions out of APAC. Now, I would like to know from you, do Chinese companies like domestic brands, or are they more open to foreign brands when it comes to fleet vehicles?
You mean for some international companies going in China, do they prefer Chinese brand or international brand of vehicles?
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Okay. From my view, I think for some electricity vehicles, they are more and more preferred for Chinese brand. And for traditional, for the oil, they may be, they may be focused on international brands just like BBA, Benz, BMW, and Audi.
And in terms of the vehicles themselves, do they prefer bigger cars, SUVs, smaller cars, sedans, hatchbacks?
Actually, for this, we should know who will use these vehicles. If for some, maybe for some senior manager, for their family cars, they try to use MPV just like GLH. But for some business usage, maybe for sedan, and if they go outside outside downtown, maybe they need SUV. So all this based on what kind of usage of the vehicles, they decide what kind of vehicles they will need, they will use.
Can you detail a little bit what are the most popular brands for fleet customers in China? What are the most popular car brands?
Yeah, in China, I think for international brand, as I said, for premium cars, BBA, we call it Benz, BMW, Audi, and for some middle cars, I think for European brand, just like Volkswagen, and also we can get Hyundai, and also for China for FAW, for Chang'an, for this, and also for Geely, for this kind of maybe their famous brand in China.
Okay, let's talk now about some trends that we are seeing globally and probably also in China. How is legislation and taxation impacting the fleet market and the leasing business?
From my view, for the taxation, you mean that if the company owns the vehicles, the asset will be depreciation. But if they're leasing the cars, they should, for the leasing fees as after the fees, so they include their cost. So this is good for their taxations. And if the company to buy the cars, if especially they buy the electric vehicles, there are regulations to encourage them to deduction the registration tax
In some other regions, we are now moving forward with electrification, with EVs. Also in China, there is a strong push for electrification. How important are electric vehicles already today for companies and for fleet customers? And what is your idea about the future of fleet electrification?
From my view, for the electric vehicles, this trend, I think this market is growing. Yeah, for example, there was a number that the total new energy vehicle is around almost 5 million for the running by the end of 2020. Of these account for 1.75% for the total running. And this number is increasing, I think. This is the first thing. The second thing is because we know for the CO2 emission, actually for the electric vehicle is account for the deduction for the CO2 emission. And the third thing is in China, more and more companies, they will take care of the CO2 emission. So combine the government motivate for all the people, including the companies, to use the electric vehicles. So I think for the electrical vehicles, the future is prosperous in China.
Mm-hmm. And is that future also prosperous for the complete country, or is it more related to some states or to some cities?
All over the country.
Okay. How is it with the EV charging infrastructure in China? Is that well developed, or is it so that companies themselves need to look for charging infrastructure?
Actually, from my view, I think in China, for the charge station infrastructure, in these years is construction, how to say, big, in the huge speed. If you see maybe for the past 3 years, you can see for these 3 years, you can see a lot of charge station built up, and for this speed, still growing. So I think in the future, for the charge station, you can see just like the fuel station, you can see everywhere.
Let's now move from electrification to mobility, new mobility solutions like shared mobility, micro mobility, perhaps ride hailing. How popular are those solutions today for Chinese companies or for companies, multinational companies in China?
Okay, I think just like for the cost down or cost, so some companies, they combine for the long-term leasing, we call the full service leasing and ride hailing or car sharing, using these types of mobility together. So for example, today we visit one of clients, they ask us to lease them maybe 30 cars, and then need us to provide a platform to decrease their cost by increasing their car usage percentage. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a real trend we call new mobility method.
How is it with the public transport in China? Is that also well developed, and is that used also on a company-wide basis?
Actually, in the last, I think, maybe 10 years, for China, for public transportation, also growing fast, especially for some tier 2 or tier 3 cities. For this public transportation increasing and get more and more convenience for people.
We know, of course, that the economy, GDP in China over the years has been growing. We expect also growth in the years to come. This means that more and more people will have, let's say, more money will perhaps also have a better welfare. Who within the company can have a company car?
Sorry. I think in the company, for the senior manager, especially for the foreigner in China, they will have the company car. And the second, for some admin for the department, they sharing the vehicles. And the third thing, I think, for some their business, just like for their salesman, they go to customer side to using the vehicles. I think for these three, kind of things.
A final topic that I would like to discuss with you is it possible to include China in a fleet program that is covering Asia Pacific as a whole? And even, can you include China easily in a global fleet strategy? Or do you think that you need to consider China as sort of a separate market, as an exception?
Actually, from my view, I think China market is growing, and I think cannot be separated from the global strategy. So I think the trend for all international companies, they should include China as their global strategy. I think.
What is your main tip, the most important tip for fleet managers that get responsibility over China? What should they do? What is the first thing to do?
Okay, that's a great question. I think there are maybe at least 3 or 4 things they should consider. The first, they should find a right partner, who can understand and know how to cooperate to align with their strategies, their global strategy, such as green fleet. Okay, the second thing, I think they partners should have the strong financial background and nationwide coverage, so that they can have one partner sign the contract and they can get the nationwide services. The second thing. And the third thing, the partner should have the service concept for leasing business. Not especially for the operation leasing business. It means that because the contract period is not only 1 moment, but also for the 3 and 5 years. So after sales service is very, very important. So we should provide the right services for them. So they should find. And finally, I think the partner should have the tools. Should have the tools to help them to manage their fleet. And their partner or leasing supply should provide the data, integrate their global data tools, so that they can run report global ways. So I think at least for these 4 tips for the international fleet managers, when they include China as their region, they should consideration.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lin Liu of Chuki, for your presentation, for answering the questions. I think that the audience has now a very good understanding about the fleet dynamics of the market called China. Ladies and gentlemen, don't hesitate to watch the other regional and country deep dives available on demand in our section. And I hope that you have a great global fleet conference.